Time to finally make some useful tool, a naming convention fixer. Projects usually have some naming convention, and it is probably more important than you think. In Unreal and some other engines, assets usually have the same file extension. In our case, it is .uasset. It means there is no simple way of identifying what the asset is just by looking on its path. You have to have editor open or use some script. What is more, there are often various files that are tightly bound together in some way and share part of the name, like MechWarrior static mesh, MechWarrior diffuse texture, MechWarrior normal texture, MechWarrior material, and so on. We could replace all those texture, material, mesh, and other parts of the name with some abbreviations. It will not only make lots of names fit in the preview in the content browser, but also it will help us with asset file path length limitation, which on Windows is only 260 characters. Shortening folder and asset names is really important in that case. Microsoft has already removed this restriction in Windows 10, but this issue is still causing trouble in many projects. In our project, we will have to fix all incorrect names and will follow recommended prefixes from official Epic's documentation. It means that static meshes will begin with SM underscore, textures with T underscore, materials, material instances with MI underscore, and so on. In this particular video, we will implement only those three classes because you will be learning how to work with selected assets, how to use for each loop, and how to rename an asset. But adding support for more classes will require some copying and pasting, which is not a perfect scenario. In the next video, we will remake this tool as a more data-driven, and adding more classes will require only a few clicks, and introducing any modifications will be way simpler. So for now, we're going to do the simple way, but not the perfect way. Let's right mouse button in Content Browser and go to Editor Utilities and create Editor Utility Blueprint. I'm going with Asset Action Utility, and I will name my blueprint as BP underscore simple rename. Let's open it in editor. Oh, it's already docked. Perfect. And right mouse button and search for custom event. That will be the event that runs our feature, and I will call it simple rename. Just remember to enable call-in editor in details tab to make sure that it is callable. And now let's think about how the user will use it. Let's go back to our content browser, and the first scenario is that we select a single asset, right mouse button on it, and we go to scripted asset actions. The other scenario is that user selects multiple assets, like those 6 here, and then does the same thing. We want our tool to be able to process single asset as well as hundreds of selected assets. And that means that we have to get a list of all selected assets in some way and then run same logic on each of them. And for that, we already have a function that returns lists of assets, and it's just get selected assets. We're lucky, Epic has exposed it for us. It returns value that is an array of assets, and to process them one by one with the same logic, we can use for each loop. So let me quickly connect those nodes together, and I will explain how it works. Our for each loop gets an array and executes a loop body flow for each of elements. When this is being executed, we have access to current element, and we also have current number of iteration, which is array index. Once everything is done, and I mean that if we have 10 array elements, it means that we have processed 10 of them already, all of them, then this completed flow is being executed. And to demonstrate it, we could print names of our assets and then some finish line at the end. So we already have access to our array element, and we only have to get its display name, which is the name of the asset in editor. We get return name, and we can connect it to the print string. You may have noticed that all the nodes we were working with before had output and input node for the flow, like the ones that we just connected. Those little triangles that are empty inside, and once connected, they fill with white background. Many nodes that are getting values or declaring some values don't have those, and they will be evaluated on the go when they are needed by the nodes they are plugged into, which is pretty handy for us. It just simplifies and reduces a number of those links on the screen. Right, so we have the print for each asset in our array, and now I will copy this print and connect it with this completed here, and I will name it loop finished. So now let's save and compile. Let's move back to our content browser. I still have those 6 assets selected, so let me just right mouse button on it, scripted asset actions, and run simple rename. This log in the viewport already disappeared, but if we go to output log, we can see that here we have our names printed, and at the very end there is this loop finished. So this is how it works. We will have to create some logic that checks what kind of asset we are dealing with, then checks if it's named correctly, and if not, apply the fix. So let's first focus on checking if it is the type we are looking for. Let's see if it's a static mesh. If you are working with Unreal 5.5, you can use isA node, and if you don't see it in the search, just add a bracket because we are looking for something called isA soft. And here we of course have to connect the flow, then array element, and we have to pick the class we are looking for. And we have few available static meshes. The first one says that it is some interface, data interface, so it's probably not what we are looking for. And the other one says that it's some piece of geometry, it's something about actors, and as we know, actors are created from assets. It says something about components, so I guess this is the correct one. And that's our comparison with the class we are looking for, and it says true if it is what we are looking for, false if not. But if you are working with older Unreal 5.1, 5.2, or maybe for any reason you are working with Unreal 4 because it is still in use when I'm recording, and you can do editor utilities there as well. So what to do in that case? In that case, you are looking for a cast node, and when we search for cast2, there may be more or less results. So we have to type the name of the class we are looking for, cast2 static mesh, and that's it. It works almost the same. We also have to connect this object, but what is the difference? If you are just looking for the type of your class, if you want to compare it with some class, then use isA. But if you want to use functions that are specific for this kind of class, like it may be resolution or compression settings for texture, or some LOD settings for static mesh, then in that case, you need cast2. That's the rule of thumb. Of course, in older versions of Unreal, you cannot use isA at all, but if you are working with the newer one, try to use the best practices. It is the most important for those who work with gameplay blueprints because they are evaluated very often on every frame, and it's less important for editor tools because if they execute 5% slower, it's probably not gonna be a deal breaker if it's just a batch operation you run from time to time, but still try to use correct practices because even if it makes a little difference right now, your tool may grow in complexity and at some point it will be really important, or maybe you have a junior on your team who just joined and now he's copying patterns from your blueprints. So keeping that in mind, it would be good to have them as well created as possible. So in my case, because I'm using the newer Unreal, I'm staying with is a soft class comparison. And then if it is not a static mesh, it will execute false. So we could add another check here and see if it is a texture. So let's connect it here and our object as well and see if this is a texture 2D. Yeah, and if it's not texture 2D, we will see if it's material instance. Nice, we have it done. We just need to connect those. And if it's none of those three, we don't care, nothing will be executed. And in the next video, we will make a better tool anyway, so don't waste your time copying, pasting those nodes. Because you will see soon that it will be a lot of copying, pasting, and it will be very prone to human error. But back to the main topic. We are able to see what kind of asset we are dealing with. And now, if we found the one we were looking for, we have to see if it requires fixing the name. So for that, we can check if it's display name. See, we are using display name again. Starts with correct prefix. So there is a node called starts with, and we'll see if it is sm underscore. It returns us this red icon value, which is a Boolean, which means true or false value. So true or false value is a perfect thing to be used on a branch, on if statement. So let's connect it here. So the flow goes on. And if it is true that it starts with correct prefix, we do nothing. But if it's false, we have to rename our asset. So we can do rename asset. And I picked the wrong node because there is more than a single one of them. So let me search again. And we're not looking for this node from editor scripting. We want the one from development. And it will let us use not the asset path, but actual object. So I will connect this array element here. And we have some new name to be assigned. And if you save and compile this right now and try executing, this program will probably crash because we cannot set empty new name. Another thing is that I said that we have to connect false statement, not the true one, to this node. So let me quickly correct it. And now let's build the name. We cannot leave this field empty. With our asset, which is somewhere here on the left side, we can get the display name. We have it already here. And we can just use append node to concatenate strings. But prefix is going to be the first part of the string, so we have to plug it into B, not into A. And let's type sm underscore, and that's gonna be our return value. That's really nice, but as you can see, when we have more of those nodes here, we'll have lots of pins that are connected to this for loop on the left side, and it will be a huge mess. We already have 4 of those blue lines coming out of it, and there will be 2 more, so that's gonna be 6, and many coming out of those get display names. And I think we could simplify it a little by introducing some variable that holds current asset. So let me make here more space. Let's also move it a bit to the right side. And let's make a temporary variable called current asset. We need to navigate to Outliner on the left side, variables, and use this plus icon to create a new one. I will call it current asset. And we need to change the type just to object. And we need object reference, which is reference to existing object that is loaded. All right, now we just drag and drop it here, and we have 2 options, set or get. And I will go with set. We need to plug the flow here. And let's connect this array element. So each time this part of loop is executed, an array element, which is asset we are iterating over, will be assigned to current asset. And now you may be tempted to connect this output node to this is a node. And I was really tempted to do that many times in the past, and it seems like it should work, looks like it should work, everything says it should work, but from my experience, in many cases, it's faulty. So just don't use it. And if you are using Unreal 5.5, 0.1, 0.2, or 3, or maybe 5.6, and it's working, it is great. But for past 2 years, I have always been struggling with it, and each time I tried using it the way it seems to work, it didn't. So just please trust me and don't do it. Just don't. So now, when I look on my node graph from the distance, I think I can leave those 3 connected to this for loop, because adding a variable node from the left side in this way isn't making it any clearer. But I will use such node with a variable on the right side of my graph, because there it seems to make sense. So this display name is no longer getting value from the loop, it's getting this get current asset. And we have reduced number of links here. And also our asset renamer will also use it. And hopefully, at least for me, it is easier to manage those now. And sorry for zooming in and out. I know it may have been confusing or maybe even a bit epileptic for you. So I will try to avoid it. And now we have to do some copy and pasting to implement the same feature for 2 remaining classes. So let me copy and paste the logic. Let me also connect those nodes here. And we have to remember that even though we have correct classes here, we still have to fix string prefixes that we have in our nodes. And the middle one class is texture, so it's gonna be t underscore here. And when it comes to this material instance, it says mi underscore, and the same here. You could have those prefixes also stored in some variables or maybe an array, some dictionary, but this is a temporary blueprint and we'll have a nicer solution for it, so I'm not focusing on cleaning that up. So our node graph isn't that complex. Hopefully it will work out of the box. We just have to save it, compile, and let me copy few example assets from right to the left side, so I don't modify original assets. And 2 of those first and the second one will require renaming because they start with incorrect name. There is no prefix at all. And the one on the right side has sm underscore prefix, so it shouldn't be modified. You don't want to have it sm underscore sm, and if you run it, third time, another sm. We want it clean, so let's select them. Scripted asset actions, simple rename, and they are renamed, which is great. We can look also for some textures. Those are already named properly, but we could copy and paste it and break it. And now let's right mouse button, scripted asset actions, simple rename, and the naming has been fixed. So you learned how to work with selected assets, with strings, with for loops, and in the next video we are gonna use a data table, which is some table very much like Excel or Google spreadsheet, and it will make our tool totally data driven.